The Ghostly Guilt, a Brunswick Tale. In the quiet town of Brunswick, Maine, nestled among the pine forests, lived an elderly recluse named Harold Butler. Back in 1860, he was suspected by the townsfolk of having committed an unforgivable act, the murder of a traveling salesman who had sought shelter at his home for the night. These were times when traveling traders were a common sight, braving the lonely paths of the country, seeking the hospitality of strangers, and often finding themselves in the company of some odd and unscrupulous characters. The salesman, burdened with a heavy bag of goods and a purse thick with coins, was last seen entering Butler's residence, known in the town as Old Man Butler's house. Unfortunately, he was never seen again. 7 years later, Father Gregory, a local Catholic priest widely respected in the region, was passing by Butler's secluded farm on a moonlit night. As he reached a small bridge spanning a dried-up creek, he spotted the silhouette of a man standing there, his figure highlighted against the mist-veiled backdrop of the forest. The man appeared to be a salesman with a large pack strapped to his back. Father Gregory, a friendly man, greeted him warmly and offered him a ride. The stranger, however, remained silent, his finger pointing down towards the dry creek as if hinting at something. The priest, finding the gesture odd but not alarming, looked down into the ravine but saw nothing. When he turned back to address the man again, he had vanished. This was followed by the priest's horse bolting away in fear, giving him no choice but to ride home at breakneck speed, the uncanny encounter fresh in his mind. After recounting his eerie experience to his family, Father Gregory returned to the scene at daybreak, accompanied by 2 fellow townsfolk, Robert Harper and Thomas Kane. What they found sent chills down their spines. Harold Butler's lifeless body was hanging from the bridge, right above where the spectral salesman had stood the previous night. While removing Butler's body, they disturbed the loose soil of the slope underneath, revealing a gruesome sight: human bones, partially exposed to the elements. They were quickly identified as the remains of the missing salesman. During the subsequent investigation, it was concluded that Harold Butler had ended his own life in a fit of temporary insanity, and that the salesman, Jacob Miller, had been murdered by an unidentified perpetrator. The eerie correlation between Father Gregory's spectral encounter and the grim discoveries left an indelible mark on the town's memory, turning Brunswick into a place where fact and lore intertwine. Midnight Waltz, the phantom pool player. In a time where we measured our lives by the rhythm of swiping screens and digital notifications, I found myself thrust into an isolated and antiquated corner of the world. My work as a tech consultant had led me to an outlying town with a spotty internet connection and a mysterious and very old hotel, where I was doomed to spend several evenings. Its brick-and-mortar shell was tinged with the patina of age, and inside was a mishmash of antique furniture that echoed stories of past eras. The gusty wind toyed with the hotel's shutters, creating a symphony of eerie nocturnal sounds, a chorus sung by the decades of history that clung to this structure. The walls thrummed with memories, threading through the damp corridors and winding up the spiral staircase. The manager, an elderly man with an eye for detail, prattled on about past tenants and untimely deaths as he led me to my room. As the tempest outside blustered, my solitude was abruptly interrupted by an unexpected and uncanny melody. The rhythmic, metronomic pulsing, a distinct clack, clack, seemingly arose from the adjacent room. It was unmistakable, the resounding echo of billiard balls colliding, underscored by an ethereal hum that sent ripples of disquiet up my spine. It was a perplexing disruption, given that the manager had assured me of my solitary status. Through the inky darkness of the room, I cast a cautious glance at the wall separating my quarters from the ominous symphony next door. Each muffled clatter echoed a chilling undercurrent of an eerie waltz, pulsating in harmony with the staccato rhythm of my hammering heart. It was an uncanny, disconcerting performance, plucked from the strings of the unseen, compelling yet terrifying. The billiard balls collided with a sickening resonance, the acoustics amplified by the hollow emptiness of the room beyond. The sounds twined and tangled in the air, the sharp clacks and hushed whispers resonating and reflecting off the barren walls. Each sound was akin to a phantasmal stroke on a canvas of silence, narrating an unspoken tale of a bygone era. The rhythm of the game, it began to play in my mind a ghastly orchestra of the past. I pictured a corpulent figure bending over the billiard table, ghostly pallor bathed in the spectral light, focused on the spherical targets. His hand, an eerie echo in the gloom, would pull back and with an almost breathless precision, propel the cue ball into its counterparts. Each collision punctuated the dead silence, sending a billow of icy chills coursing through me. With every second, the game took on a menacing significance, the enigmatic player etching his narrative into the cold fabric of the night, each clack a spine-tingling rhythm resonating in the silence. As the intensity of the game escalated, I was seized by an irrational fear of being summoned as a scorekeeper, a chill participant in this ethereal tournament. But then, the phantasmal symphony came to an abrupt halt. The restless clacks and rolling whispers dwindled, gradually replaced by an oppressive silence. The sudden cessation of sounds was more eerie than their existence. The quiet seemed to stretch into infinity, the hush punctuated only by the hissing gusts of the storm outside, weaving a shroud of dread that hung heavily in the room. I dared not draw the breath I so desperately needed, afraid that even the slightest whisper would disturb the sudden tranquility. The room hummed with a morbid resonance, the echo of the ghostly pool game hanging in the air like phantom notes suspended in a symphony. Slowly, I ventured from my quarters, drawn to the source of the sound with a dread-induced curiosity. The adjacent room, when I managed to pry open its creaky door, was awash in the pallid morning light filtering through the dust-streaked window. I stood on the threshold, my heart pounding in my chest as I took in the sight. In the center stood a weathered billiard table, its green surface dulled by years of disuse and its edges scarred by the passage of time. I could almost picture the ethereal scene. The corpulent figure hunched over the table, spectacles perched on the bridge of his nose, wielding his cue stick with a ghostly precision. The room was a chilling panorama, an echo of a life left untouched by the hands of time. As the initial fear began to thaw, replaced by a morbid fascination, I resolved to learn more about the shadowy billiard player who had held me captive in my room with his spectral symphony. Conversations with the old manager, fraught with hushed whispers and guarded secrets, painted a vivid picture of the hotel's former glory. The room had once been a billiard hall, home to a cadre of gentlemen with a penchant for the game, including the rotund man, a once distinguished figure in town, who had met an untimely demise mid-game. His story, like the echo of billiard balls, resonated in the hushed halls of the hotel. A tale of shadowy apparitions and unending games became the eerie thread that wove the hotel's history, a ghost story that lingered long after the tale ended, sending a shiver down my spine. Though eager to depart the hotel's spectral halls, I found myself reluctantly drawn to the mysterious room, to the table where the ghostly waltz was played out each night. By the time I finally took my leave, I had a tale etched deep into my memory, a tale of spooky games and symphonies that I would carry with me, a chilling souvenir from a lonely hotel lost in time. Just when I thought I had escaped the grasp of the phantom pool player, in the silence of the night, I could still hear the faint echo of billiard balls colliding, a ghastly melody that would haunt me long after the echoes had faded. A reminder of the spectral waltz I had unwillingly been a part of in that eerie hotel. The uncanny player might have ceased his game, but his spooky symphony played on, an unending requiem to a game left unfinished, a tale left untold. The Witchcraft Kittens, Innocence Reborn. In a quiet hamlet cradled within the chill clasp of 17th century Europe, in an era haunted by the specter of witch trials, an inscrutable riddle was born. Johannes, an unassuming fellow of simple inclinations, found his life ensnared in a conundrum that echoed like a banshee's wail each sunrise, the unheralded appearance of kittens. The day Johannes stumbled upon the first of these phantasmal felines, his eyebrows knitted in a puzzled frown. Yet he dismissed it as a peculiar anomaly, a ripple in the calm pond of his existence. With the dawn of the next day, however, another kitten materialized, its eerie eyes searing into his soul. A shudder of unease swept through him, like a cold wind blowing through a desolate graveyard. His heart pounded in his chest as if it wished to escape the uncanny situation he found himself in, yet Johannes brushed it off again, ascribing it to coincidence. The third day, however, bore an ominous gift. 4 new kittens, scattered in the most peculiar of places, right next to his loaf of bread, amongst his drying linens, peeping from within his empty milk jug, and one just sitting ominously in the corner of his humble abode, its haunting cries echoing off the stone walls. Their dreadful eyes were no longer just fiery, they flickered with an otherworldly light that froze his blood and turned his bones to ice. Now, the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore or attribute to mere happenstance. When Johannes finally gave voice to his secret, the villagers, already soaked in the brine of superstition and dread, gazed at these kittens as though they were death omens, spectral couriers bearing warnings of impending doom. The whisper of witchcraft began to slither around them, lurking in their hushed conversations, stoking their fears like a steady draft feeds a flame. As they peered at the creatures, a collective shudder ran through them, a shudder that shook the very foundations of their tranquil existence. Amid the fearful turmoil, a stranger, Alaric, arrived. His enigmatic aura and seemingly arcane knowledge piqued the curiosity of the villagers, and one day he asserted with a nonchalant confidence that he could cease the disconcerting kitten manifestations. In the tense days following his bold proclamation, the villagers watched with bated breath as, indeed, the kittens began to disappear, their ominous cries fading from memory. The village drew a collective sigh of relief, but a kernel of uncertainty still lingered in their hearts. On the day the last spectral kitten vanished, Alaric unveiled the truth. The kittens were no mere cats. They were the spirits of the accused witches, their souls trapped within the feline bodies by a spell of his own making. He had now set them free. But Alaric's startling revelation was his final act. His life abruptly snuffed out, leaving the villagers in shock. On his deathbed, he insisted his tale was true, adding a sinister caveat. The village was now at risk. The spirits, once imprisoned, were now free, and their wrath could be calamitous. The villagers, Johannes at the forefront, were left in a state of mounting dread, the specter of the released spirits hanging heavy over their heads. Alas, the apparent simplicity of the kitten's manifestations hid a horrifying reality. As the echoes of Alaric's words faded, the village braced itself, the cobbled streets shrouded in an eerie silence, the villagers awaiting the ominous repercussions of their liberated demons. Spectral Promises, the Clifford-Nolan Agreement. In the blazing warmth of 1881's summer, I found myself in the company of a gentleman by the name of Edward T. Clifford, a dweller of the quaint town of Hartford, Connecticut. In pursuit of rejuvenating his health, he had ventured to San Diego, carrying with him a note of introduction from a certain Mr. Arthur Nolan. Having served with Nolan in the Union Army during the tumultuous times of the Civil War, I had come to know him as a man of honor. Post the war, he had settled in Hartford and eventually gained a reputation in legal circles. The warm regard he held for Clifford, mentioned in his note, persuaded me of the latter's character. One day at a luncheon, Clifford shared an intriguing agreement between him and Nolan. They had solemnly vowed that whoever was first to cross the threshold of the afterlife would, if feasible, send a message from the other side. They had left the specifics of this communication to the discretion of the departed, given his new ethereal reality. A few weeks post this revealing conversation, I ran into Clifford, deep in thought on San Diego's bustling Fifth Avenue. His response to my greeting was a curt nod, leaving me puzzled and slightly miffed. The following day, I crossed paths with him once more at the lobby of the Horton Grand Hotel. Before he could give me the cold shoulder again, I cornered him and asked for an explanation. After a moment's hesitation, Clifford confessed that he doubted the continuance of our friendship, since Nolan seemed to have withdrawn his. He was at a loss to explain why, and assumed Nolan would enlighten me on the matter. After I asked for further explanation, Clifford stated that he had encountered Nolan just a few minutes before he met me, and had received the same icy greeting from him. He went on to say he had seen Nolan again shortly before our current encounter. I found Clifford's actions remarkably considerate, yet it seemed necessary to mention at this point that Nolan had passed away. He had breathed his last in New York City 4 days prior to my conversation with Clifford. When I relayed this news to Clifford, along with the letters confirming it, his reaction convinced me of his sincerity. He admitted that he must have mistaken another man for Nolan, and that the stranger's greeting was nothing more than polite acknowledgement. He even noted that this man lacked Nolan's trademark beard. We agreed that Clifford must have seen someone else, and the subject was dropped. Unbeknownst to him, I possessed a recent photograph of Nolan, taken a week before his passing. The photograph showed Nolan without his beard,